The daily grind is the pace of life in the city that wears us down. It's when traffic is backed up and nobody's going anywhere fast. It's when our days are packed with mundane work and no real breaks. Year after year, we've been typing away on our computers, but our work isn't fulfilling us. Even if we work from home, our office space can still feel just like a cubicle. And working harder doesn't directly lead to more time and money, it just seems to burn us out faster. Well, imagine if for 1 week a month we left the city, took our computer to work in a more beautiful setting, one where the pace of life wasn't such a grind. As it turns out, some of our great thinkers in history ventured outside of their cities to do some of their best work. Albert Einstein wrote letters to political leaders in the 1930s while enjoying his long summer months at his favorite beach cottage on the New York coast. Those letters changed the world as we know it. Charles Dickens, who lived in London, would leave the busy city to retreat to a small seaside motel on the coast of England where he wrote some of his most important books. George Orwell wrote 1984 while living in a remote house on a windswept Scottish island. All of these great thinkers escaped the noise of the big city from time to time. And if you've ever dreamed of having a remote workspace of your own, then this is how you could follow along in their footsteps. The air is so fresh out here. I love it. I love being able to walk outside of my studio on my coffee break and go for a walk in the forest. Like, be able to look up and see these views of the mountains and all these beautiful trees. It's just the pace is so different than in the city. In the city, there was exhaust and traffic and to-do lists, and I'd been living in the city my whole life, so it was just wearing me down. I moved out here like 5 months ago, and it totally shifted my perspective. Now I feel refreshed when I work, and I feel refreshed when I go back to the city. So it's just a win-win. But I didn't want to just share the benefits of having a remote workshop because the mission of today's video is different. Okay, so the mission of today is I'm gonna break down how much money did it cost in order to build this tiny remote work studio. So if you're somebody who's dreamed of having like a remote workspace in a beautiful location, then I'm gonna break down the costs. These are the real costs in order to get you started. So by watching this video, you'll be one step closer to having a workspace in your dream location. So a little backstory of this structure. During the summer, I built this studio. It's on my friend's property. They let me use a cozy corner of their forested acreage, and now this is where my studio is. So the studio measures 8 feet wide, 12 feet long, and about 10 feet high. And honestly, it's like the perfect size. It's easy to cool down in the summer. Just open up the windows, open up the door, bada bing, bada boom, the studio's cool. Also, it's easy to heat in the winter. And to make it feel a little bit bigger than it is, I added some like extension roofs. So right now I'm on this little patio deck. I have an extension roof over my head, and it feels like the studio's much bigger. So here's the thing. If you want to work in a beautiful location a couple days a month, or have a little retreat center that you can go to do some quality work, this is totally a possibility for you. And if you build it the same way I built mine, then here's exactly how much it cost. Okay, so the first cost of this building was $1,000 I spent purchasing the frame of an old shed. Now I actually used this frame as like the skeleton structure for this entire building. And a bunch of the wood that came with it, a bunch of the concrete that came with it, it ended up saving me a bunch of money. So what I did was I looked up on Craigslist, I looked up shed, garden shed or something like that. And I found this post. And the guy had posted this photo, and he basically took his old shed, took it apart, and put the framed walls into a pile. Now this pile of framed walls, that was the beginning of my studio. So I turned this into this. Okay, so the next cost was I spent about $300 on concrete tubes, 6 bags of concrete, some hardware and bolts and stuff in order to connect the floor of the structure to the foundation. So this is what it looks like. So yeah, this is filled with concrete, and the floor itself is like bolted to hardware that's at the top of the concrete. And it's absolutely pouring rain out here, so we'll go back inside. Good Lord. So the next cost was $700 that I spent on these 3 windows. I wanted something that like really opened up the space. Everywhere you look, the space is just like wide open. And that's because of these 3 windows. And I didn't skimp on them at all. They're like triple, quadruple glazed and this and this and this. They're just really ballin' windows. They're awesome. You don't want to skimp on windows and you don't want to skimp on lighting. You want the lighting to be bright and natural. You want the windows to be everywhere. And then your space just feels better. But funny story about the door. So I was about to spend about $400 or $500 on the steel door with a nice window. And the day that I was going to buy the door, I went out of my apartment in Vancouver and I found this door on the side of the road in somebody's free pile. And then I asked the old timer walking into the house, like, do you have a key for this old door? He's like, oh yeah, let me grab that for you. So here I am. I got my skateboard. I'm on my way to work. I got this like door on my skateboard. I'm cruising across town with this big door and the frame and stuff. I'm like, man, I just saved $400 or $500. Nothing wrong with that, eh? All right, next I spent $200 on screws. Now I bought screws a whole bunch of times and I put the rough estimate together. I think it was around $200. Next, I spent $400 on 2x4s, and what we did with this structure is we added a pony wall. So originally the roof came down and was around 6 feet. We added 2 feet extension, so I ran 2x4s all the way around the building a couple times and lots of ribs, lots of 2x4s. So there's $400 there that I spent on 2x4s. Then I had to spend $100 on a big roll of tar paper. I actually wrapped the whole place in tar paper and tar papered the roof. All right, the next cost, I spent $300 on a cedar siding. Yeah, we had a thing going. Is it lined up there? Because I added a pony wall, because I extended the height of the wall, effectively raising the roof, then I needed cedar siding and I wanted to cover the extra area that we had added on. So next I spent around $400 on a bamboo hardwood floor and flooring underlay. Now I bought the bamboo hardwood floor, I bought that was new old stock. So somebody was getting rid of their old floor that had never been used before and I got a sweet deal on it. Then I picked up some underlay at the hardware store. I rolled out the underlay, laid down the hardwood floor, and basically very much transformed the atmosphere of this place. It felt like kind of like a little old junky shed. Then after we put in the floor, it was magic. This place just felt so bright and vibrant. Felt like a good workspace after that. Okay, moving on. The next expense was $700 that I spent on plywood, roofing shingles, and roofing nails. Now, plywood, I'm not even done with my plywood purchase. Like if I were to fully insulate and add plywood walls to everything in here, probably cost an extra $2,000. But for now, I'm just gonna leave it, try to keep it warm. If I get cold in the winter, I'll put on like a parka because I'm in Canada and we have stuff like that. All right, so the final 3 costs. I spent roughly $250 on cable, on extension cords that could run from here to the power supply. So the final 2 costs of the project, I spent roughly $600 on gas and $300 on lunches and buying lunches for people that came out to work with me. So I had to borrow my friend's truck. We were moving lots of supplies around, you know, going to pick up the window, pick up the door, move the frame. We did all that. And after a while, those costs start to add up. 2 or 3 months of building and moving supplies around, I spent $600 on gas and around $300 on lunches, which I do not regret in any way because I would not have been able to finish this structure without the help of some of my very generous friends. Okay, so that's it. That's the final cost. Let's total up all of these expenses and see how much it cost in order to build this tiny studio. Okay, so I totaled up all of the costs. It ended up being around $53.50. Now that's not like a super accurate amount. There's taxes. I'm sure there's a couple receipts that I lost. There's some things I purchased that I didn't include. So probably more like $6,000 Canadian or 5,000 American dollars. Now, if I had bought and built everything with new wood and I had fully insulated and fully finished all these walls, then the project would cost $10,000. $10,000 is still pretty great, and for my situation, it's really great. My rent here is really low because I've been here for 3 or 4 months. I've already paid off almost the entire cost of building the structure. But I hope this helps. I hope this cost breakdown is able to give you the insight as to like what it takes to get a project like this off the ground. My takeaway point is this: I was able to build this structure even though I had little building experience, even though I didn't own any land, even though I didn't exactly understand what the costs involved were. And at the time I was building this, I was short on cash. And if I can do it under these circumstances, then so could somebody else. So could you perhaps. So if this is something that you've been thinking about for a while and you want to like take a step forward, I encourage you to give it a shot. Maybe start looking around, maybe start seeing, is there somebody that would let me put a small workspace on their property? And if you build it this size, 8 by 12, that could fit on the flatbed of a truck. I could ship this thing across the country. I could move it if I wanted to. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap it up there and leave you with this thought. In most of the countries around the world, the best land has all been sold. But that doesn't mean that the best land is all being used, which means there's space for people like you and me to find cozy little corners, to make awesome little spaces and have room to create the stuff that we want to create. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Why do I always punch it?